In the far north of Vietnam, where clouds sleep low on the spines of mountains and silence rides the backs of goats, there lived a boy named Pao, 12 years old, tiny even for his age, but in his eyes, something ancient. He belonged to the Hmong people, a tribe who carved life out of stone, who sang to the fog, and who believed the wind had memory. Pao never went to school. His family had no electricity. Their roof leaked. Their hands were always cracked. But they laughed more than they cried until the winter came, and his father, a quiet man who carved flutes and bowls, fell ill. The wind howled for 3 nights, and then he was gone. No funeral, just a shallow grave near the rice terrace. The villagers burned incense. Pao didn't speak for a week. He found his father's carving knife. Not fancy, just a piece of steel shaped from an old truck spring. Its handle smelled like camphor and sweat. That night, Pao picked up a broken log. He didn't know what he was doing. He just needed to do something. And so, he carved. Not clean, not even, just lines, swirls, marks. But when he stepped back, he realized he had carved his father's breath. A spiral of wind twisting upward, holding a tiny pair of lips. He called it Chatoi Gio. Father blows the wind. He placed it near the window, and when the breeze came through the cracks, it made the lips tremble, like whispering. He began carving every day. Not people, not animals, but things only Pao could see. The curve of his mother's laughter, the smell of steamed corn, the way sadness feels when you're the only one awake in the village. One day, a French traveler passed through, saw the carvings stacked near Pao's hut, asked through gestures who made them. Pao pointed to himself. The man took a photo, then posted it online with one sentence: "A boy who carves the wind." Within a week, someone from Hanoi came looking. Within a month, Pao's work was in a gallery. Within a year, he was invited to Saigon. But Pao didn't leave. Not yet. Because the wind wasn't finished talking. If this story is already touching your heart, if you believe memory lives not just in minds, but in hands and wood, then subscribe to Wood Carving Artist. Because Pao is only beginning. And sometimes, the smallest hands carve the loudest legacy. There was a legend in Pao's village. High above the rice terraces, beyond the clouds and whispering rocks, stood a tree older than time. No one knew its name. No one dared carve it. The elders said it was a Kai Join Woi, a tree that waits for the right hands. Pao's father once took him there, many years before the sickness. He'd placed Pao's small palm on the bark and said, "Every tree carries memory, but this one, it remembers those who've lost their voice." Pao hadn't thought of that day in years, but now, with his carving speaking louder than his lips ever could, he understood. So one morning, before dawn, he packed a blanket, a boiled egg, and the old carving knife, and climbed, through fog so thick he could barely see his feet, past cliffs that echoed his breath back like distant ancestors calling home. Hours passed, until at last, it appeared. Not the tallest tree, not the thickest, but it had presence, twisted, weathered, its roots wrapped around stone like a mother refusing to let go. Pao approached, laid the knife on the ground. Saturday and waited. He didn't draw, didn't imagine, didn't think, just listen. The wind passed through the branches like a flute. The bark seemed to hum, not music, but remembrance. After 3 hours, Pao stood, touched the tree, then carved, gently, with reverence, only on a fallen limb, not the trunk. He carved not a face, but a heartbeat, a raised pulse line, jagged, uneven, that wrapped around the wood like a story with no ending. When he finished, he whispered the only word he'd spoken in days, Shah, then left it there, not to take, not to sell, but to give back. That night, as he returned to the village, the wind felt warmer, the sky more open, and his sleep dreamless but peaceful. The next day, an elder came to Pao's house, placed a hand on his shoulder, said nothing, but left a pouch of dried corn, a gift of respect in the Hmong way. Pao had passed the test, not a skill, but a silence. You believe that true art begins not with inspiration, but with listening, then Pao's story is far from over. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and follow the boy who doesn't speak, yet makes the whole mountain sing. He arrived in a raincoat, boots heavy with mud, hair full of mist, breath steaming in the highland air. His name was Tum, a preservationist from Hue, worked with temples, pagodas, ancestral halls. But he wasn't like other outsiders. He didn't carry cameras, didn't offer money right away, didn't ask to buy Pao's work. He came with only one question. Do you know how to carve a dream? Pao didn't answer, but he didn't walk away either. So Tum sat beside him on a bamboo mat, shared sticky rice and ginger tea, showed him sketches, not of statues, but of a ceiling, the Tran Nha of an old Jin in Quang Tri, half bombed in the war, now being restored. They wanted to commission artists from across Vietnam, not professionals, but those whose work spoke with soul. And Ting had seen Pao's carvings. Your pieces breathe. We need that. We need to make this roof breathe again. Pao looked at the sketches. They showed dragons, clouds, fire motifs. But Pao saw something else. The empty space in the center, blank, waiting. That night, Pao didn't sleep. He stared at the stars, listened to the wind, and saw it. A dragon, not like in books, but made of wind. Its body coiled with the shape of Hajiang's limestone peaks. Its eyes closed, not sleeping, but remembering. He woke before dawn, took out his smallest chisel, and on a scrap of mulberry wood, he carved just the head. No horns, no fangs, just a calm, coiling breath. When Tum saw it, he placed a hand to his chest. That's it, he said, voice shaking. That's the dream. They didn't speak of money, they just agreed. Pao would travel south, first time ever, not to sell, but to give voice to a roof. If you've ever felt that art should live above us, breathe around us, and shelter our histories, then don't miss what's next. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist, where forgotten hands bring sacred spaces back to life. Not with power, but with presence. It took 3 days by bus, 1 boat ride, and the last mile on foot. When Pao arrived in Quang Tri, the ore was hot, thick with salt and memory. The Jin stood like a wounded soldier. Its pillars still carried the scent of old lacquer. Its beams bore char marks from war. Its roof, shattered and patched with tin. But the heart was still there, waiting. The villagers didn't say much. They watched Pau, this tiny Hmong boy with mountain dust still on his boots, approach the altar. He didn't bow, didn't kneel. He just placed his hand on the main beam and closed his eyes. He felt heat, age, pain, but also patience. You have time, it seemed to whisper. Over the next weeks, he slept in the bell tower, ate whatever the villagers brought: banana blossom soup, boiled peanuts, rice wrapped in lotus leaves. Every morning he climbed the scaffold and carved, not quickly, not boldly, but with breath. He didn't draw lines. He followed the scars in the wood, turned a bullet hole into a dragon's eye, a splintered edge into swirling cloud, a smoke stain into the curve of a tail. Each motion was slow, intentional, like he was coaxing the soul of the gene back into form. People started coming. At first, just locals, then monks, then architects, then artists. No one disturbed him because Pau didn't speak. He just carved. And the ceiling, mined day by day, Bitsabatsi, began to breathe again. One afternoon, a little girl asked her grandmother, "Who is it?" The old woman smiled. The boy who heard what even the ghosts forgot. By the 40th day, the dragon was whole, its body stretched across the rafters, not fearsome, not majestic, but gentle, as if it came not to guard the temple, but to remember it. On the final night, Pau lit 3 incense sticks, placed one by the altar, one by the old cracked beam, and one on the outer step for the ancestors who had no names left. He didn't ask for anything. He just listened. And the wind, that rare, soft southern wind, passed through the temple like a breath returning home. If this moved you, if you believe wood can carry more than weight, that it can hold memory, then follow Pau's journey. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist, where silence becomes story, and even broken ceilings can learn to sing again. The day after Pau finished the ceiling, the village held a ceremony. Nothing grand, just woven mats, a few lanterns, and bowls of Che Jiao Shan steaming under the banyan tree. But in the air, reverence. Old men who hadn't stepped into the Jin since the war came barefoot. Young artists from Jianang sketched silently. Even monks from Hue whispered blessings toward the roof. When Pao entered, no one clapped. Instead, they bowed, not to him, to the dragon, to the breath now resting above them. Later, Tum approached with a wooden box. Inside, a scholarship letter from an art institute in Japan. Fully funded, personal mentor, visa arranged, and beside it, an envelope thick with bills, enough to rebuild his family's house twice over. Pao looked at them, then at the ceiling, then shook his head. Team blinked. Why? Pao took out a small piece of wood from his satchel. Charred, crooked, still smelling of the old beam it came from. He handed it to Tum, then pointed to his heart. "I already have what I need," he said softly. The first words he'd spoken aloud in weeks. That night, he sat under the bell tower, carved nothing, just listened. The dragon above no longer needed shaping. Now, it needed time. When Pao left the next morning, no one saw him off. but someone had packed his bag with sticky rice and dried persimmons. At the gate of the village, he turned once, looked at the roof. The tiles glistened in the sun, and above them, the dragons seemed to move, not in body, but in memory. Back in Hajiang, power turned to silence. No media, no cameras, no fame, just his mother and a new piece of jackfruit wood waiting by the window. He didn't pick up the knife right away. He just sat, let the wind return, because now he wasn't carving for the world. He was carving with it. If you believe that sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we leave behind, then follow Pao's journey. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist, where the stories we don't sell are the ones that last forever. It started with one child, then two, then five. By the third week, Pao had to build a second bench from scrap wood. Not because he meant to teach, but because they kept showing up. Barefoot, sticky fingers, bright eyes. Some carried spoons, others just rocks. One girl brought a chicken bone she'd whittled into a flute. Pao didn't ask questions. He just handed them pieces of firewood, showed them how to hold a blade, where to feel the grain, when to stop, and most of all, when to listen. He didn't use chalk, didn't give grades, just sat with them as clouds drifted across the cliffs above. Some kids carved suns, some carved pigs. One boy carved rain, with lines so delicate they looked like water sliding down bark. But then came Nua. He was 7, didn't speak, didn't laugh, didn't hear. Born deaf, the other children teased him, but Pao didn't. He sat Nua beside him, gave him the softest wood, placed the boy's hand on the surface, then tapped it gently, like a heartbeat. Nua froze, then smiled. He tapped back. For the next hour, they didn't carve. They drummed, fingers against wood, a silent duet. Then Pao handed him a chisel, guided the boy's hand. Together they carved a circle, then ripples, then a wave. Not a sound, but of sensation. When it was done, Nua placed both hands on the carving and laughed. The first sound Pao had ever heard from him. High, pure, like wind catching the corner of a tent. The other children joined in, not to tease, but to try. By sunset, every child was carving not just pictures, but feelings. A girl shaped her mother's cooking. A boy etched the memory of his dog's bark. One carved the echo of loneliness after a storm. Word spread, not to the cities, but across the hills. Parents began to visit, not to ask Pao to teach, but to thank him for listening. If you've ever believed that art is not just what we make, but what we awaken in others, then don't miss the next step of Pao's journey. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist, where the quietest places often hold the loudest truths. The wind that week was wrong. Not the usual misty breath from the cliffs, but dry, hot, and hungry. Smoke arrived before the fire, first as a whisper behind the ridges, then a roar above the valley. By the time the villagers saw the flames, the forest near the border was already lost. Old trees, medicinal roots, the ones Pao's father once said, grow slow because they remember more. Gone. The fire didn't reach Pao's house, but the wind did. It carried ash, black snow falling over his doorstep. He didn't eat that night, didn't sleep. At dawn, They walked to the edge of the scorched forest. Charred silence. Even the birds seemed to have forgotten how to return. The stumps stood like tombstones. He bent down, touched one. Still warm, still smelling of memory. Then he saw it. A fallen branch, half burnt but intact. He picked it up, heavy, split, but not dead. He carried it back, placed it on his bench. The children came and asked, "You're carving firewood now?" He didn't reply. He just began, slowly, carefully, shaving off the ash, layer by layer, until beneath the black, a golden heart revealed itself. It was mulberry wood, from a tree that had stood 80 years, fed butterflies, shaded lovers, held rain. He carved not a dragon, not a wave, but a scar, a long winding groove down the middle, not clean, raw, jagged, like a wound, left open. He called it Zhuang Chai, the burn line, and below it he carved tiny feet, the feet of children, walking along a line, one by one, barefoot, silent. He placed the finished piece outside his home, not to sell, not to show, but to grieve. That night, a group of elders came with herbs, wrapped the carving in smoke, a ritual not of cleansing, but of honoring what was lost. And from that day on, Pao only carved with burnt wood, not because it was beautiful, but because it remembered. If you believe that the deepest art doesn't come from inspiration, but from survival, then Pao's journey is far from over. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist, where even the ashes tell stories, if you dare to carve them. Years passed, not in silence, but in wood shavings. The bench grew old, the knife handle smooth from many hands. The children grew tall, their carvings, braver, stranger, more alive than Pao ever imagined. One girl sculpted a tiger from bamboo root. One boy carved laughter into a bamboo flute. No sound came from it, but everyone swore they could feel it. And Nua, he now taught the youngest, still couldn't hear. But every child listened to him like he was music. Pao no longer carved every day. His hands ached in the mornings, his eyes tired sooner. But he watched, listened, guided. Sometimes, all he did was touch a piece of wood someone else was working on and whisper, "Slower." One afternoon, as fog rolled through the cliffs, Pao walked to the hill above the village. He sat on a stone his father once carved a flute upon, looked down, saw dozens of children, teenagers, mothers, and even visiting elders, sitting around carved logs, not as students, as keepers. The wind passed through the hills. It caught on the carvings, and for the first time, Pao realized it wasn't whispering anymore. It was singing. He smiled, not because of pride, but because he was no longer needed. That night, he wrote one sentence in a small notebook beside his bed. "When I'm gone, they won't look for me. They'll listen to the wind and find me there." Pao never left the mountains, never built a workshop, never signed a statue, but his legacy, etched in temple ceilings, in school benches, in prayer halls rebuilt from ash, in hands that no longer shake when holding a chisel, in silence that now knows how to speak, and in one old carving, still by his window, Chatoijiyo, the first wind, still trembling when the breeze comes, still whispering, home. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that art is not measured in museums, but in memories passed hand to hand, then join our journey. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist, where wind, wood, and wonder are carved not for sale, but for forever.